My name is Marcia Black. It is August 20th, 2024, and I'm speaking to.
Miss Delores Jackson,
And where and when were you born?
Detroit, Michigan, on January 23, 1981.
And what is your connection to Black Bottom?
My maternal grandmother lived in Black Bottom from 1947 until 1960.
Okay. And where did they live? Do you have an address?
Yes, ma'am. 2155 Sherman Street.
Okay. And while they were there, did they work in Black Bottom? Did they or Paradise Valley?
Yes, she was a housekeeper.
Okay. And how long did she do that work for? Do you know?
Oh, she did that work from around 1947 to the time she died in 2020.
Okay. And do you know the story of how your maternal grandmother got to Detroit?
Paternal.
Paternal grandmother got to Detroit?
Yes, she told me she was born in Alabama. Her and her relatives came during the Great Migration of the 1940s. She first went to live in New York with her two sisters and mom. And eventually, she had other relatives here, and they sent for her to come to Detroit. She came via train to Michigan Central Depot in 1947. She came here as a teenager when she was 17 in 1947. She lived in a room and board house with her relatives, like an auntie and an uncle, and she worked in Black Bottom and lived there on 2155 Sherman in a room and board house with other people that worked in various jobs and things like, the auto industry, cooking, cleaning, and things like that.
Okay.
So she got here via train and she was very inspired to come up here for better job opportunities, like when they had the Great Migration back in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she told me all this,
Okay.
and she was still living.
Thank you for sharing that. And what did she share with you about what was the Black Bottom community like when she was there?
Well, she told me that it was family like and that everybody did for each other and stuff. Everybody was wonderful and it was neighborly and things like that too. But there still was, a lot of racism outside the neighborhood and a lot of opportunities. Sometimes the people never really got too much, especially, at the different job. They got paid less than the other ethnic groups.
Mm-hmm. And were there any important people or places that she shared with you from Black Bottom, churches that she went to, businesses that she shopped at, or anything like that?
She didn't share too much with me about different businesses, but she knew about different areas of Detroit that had their own ethnic groups and stores and things.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an example you like to share?
About what they're.
You said like she mentioned like different areas in Detroit, like a
Yeah,
ethnic
like
group.
she mentioned, like the Dexter and Joy area was a Jewish neighborhood.
Mm,
She remembers when the African Americans couldn't go into certain neighborhoods, like the Dexter and Joy area, sometimes West Side, because a lot of neighborhoods were white, predominantly white neighborhoods, and most of the blacks couldn't rent there or live in like room and boards and things. So Black Bottom was cramped, had cramped living conditions, and she told me states have but the bus system went all over the city of Detroit when it was DSR many years ago.
mm-hmm.
And she remember they used to run 24 hours a day. She remember the stores downtown like Kearns and Hudson's and all them and things. She used to go downtown a lot too, especially after she used to go downtown a lot. And she go to the little festivals when they had them at Hart Plaza and different parks. And she still worked. And then she had my father she had my father in 1961. He was born at Herman Kiefer Hospital, and it was the original hospital. So about that time frame, she had moved from Black Bottom anyway because they was gonna be tearing down the entire area of Black Mom Harris Bottom to put in the little freeway and stuff. So she said she moved. Right now when she had my dad, Shorty had moved and she moved to the west side for some years. Then eventually they had 67 rides. She was still living here in Detroit and doing the ride. She and my dad was a little boy. And then right not too long around the time from she and my dad moved to Highland Park in 1968. And my dad grew up in Highland Park, and my grandmother lived in Highland Park from the time of 1968 until 2020 when she died in 2020. So when she lived in Highland Park, she was still like a housekeeper and things, but she eventually got a job as a husband for a Jewish family out in Oakland County. And she stayed with that job about 40 or 50 some odd years. And she met when the couple's two daughters were born and the grandkids and the great grandkids, all them were born and stuff. So how I came to the picture was I was born in Detroit in 1981 after my dad met my mom on a blind date. And then they got together, and then my mom was a couple years younger than my dad. So my dad, they got together and they was dating and stuff. Then got pregnant with me, and she told my dad that she was gonna have me. That he was the father of me, and he decided to leave the country to go into the army. And by the time I was born in '81, he already had left the country going to the army. And my mom's family was from Alabama too, so they didn't live in Black Bomb. They lived on they when mom and my maternal grandmother and my mom's two younger brothers, when they came from down south, they came in the 60s later, like late 60s, the second great migration. And they lived on a street called Cadillac Boulevard for a while behind this four family house. Then they lived on Bewick for a while. And then right about the time I was born, they lived on a street called Nashville off of Connor Gunston for a little bit. And then then my paternal grandma was living and stuff, so she saw me from like time to time. She saw my mom time to time, So when I was a baby, my maternal mom died, who was my mom's mom died, and then we went living back to Alabama for a number of years. And then when my mom came back, my mom and I came back up here alone in '94. And then she told me we met my dad back up, and she still lived with him because she was dying of cancer and things. So she asked my dad, who asked my paternal grandmother, to take care of me after my mom died. Then my mom dies, and then my paternal grandmother got custody of me through the state, and I lived with her for 5 years. She used to tell me all about the different tales of when she was in Black Bottom, when she was younger, and how the city was, how the city was vibrant and everything else before the riots happened. She wasn't here before the riots. She was here in the 67 riots later. She'd tell me about, when she used to pick cotton as a kid, and she used to housekeep and wash clothes, and take in little work here and there and stuff. And she raised my dad, and she raised him alone because his real dad wasn't really in his life too much though and stuff. And then my dad and my grandmother never got an education past eighth grade, so she couldn't really learn too much. She didn't go to high school or nothing like that because she was already here at 17. She had to, go to work and stuff, And so when she was raising me, she told me all about her life, about her lifestyle in Black Bottom, and how she heard from other people in her neighborhood that they was forced to move because they were going to put a 375 freeway in and what have you. And she moved quite a bit. She moved on Lincoln Street. When she moved to Highland Park, she moved on a street called Grove. She lived at 186 Grove for a while, but they tore the house down. Then she lived in 178 Grove for a number of years, and she also worked as a nurse too. As she worked as a nurse's aide in one of those nursing homes out in Oakland County too, as well, while she was doing the housemaid thing. And then she stopped doing the nursing job because the housekeeping job paid slightly more. And when she was raising me, she was always talking about how Black Bottom was this, Black Bottom was wonderful, and how she's going to all these different places. She's a bar hop, and she had one particular when she turned 21, she went to a bar one night, and she saw this guy passed out in the snow. I'm like, you saw that passed out in the snow, and I'm like, oh. And then she told me about the different movies, how she's go to the movie house like 2 or 3 times out the week, and she went to the radio. She knew about Martha Jean, the Queen, and different black radio stations. She was a church hop, various churches and stuff, So, and I mean, sometimes her mom, my great paternal grandmother, sometimes would come see her, and they go to like different stores downtown, like Kearns, and now Kearns they closed in '59, so they go to like Hudson's, Ward's. They went to Fred Sanders for like ice cream and whatnot. She remember all those stores downtown and things, and she remembers Wood Avenue, Campus Martial before Campus Martial got rebuilt and stuff later and things. And She remembers riding the Wood bus and this bus and that bus, And I mean, she rode the bus for most of her life after she moved up here in the 40s, so she was on DSR all the time, going to and from little jobs and from housing and stuff like that too. And she'd go to Eastern Market almost every week, pick up like food and flowers and things like that. But she still did that for a long time, even after she got custody of me when I was a teenager many years ago. So in the Eastern Market, she'd go to the little festivals at Hart Plaza. She remember when the hospital I was born in the Greektown section called Detroit Memorial Hospital. She remembers that place before when I was born there back in '81. What else she remembers? She remembers going to the riverfront for different festivals. She remembers Ray Princess. She remembers the Taste Fest. She remember all sorts of stuff, and whatnot. She remember the store. She remember Kroger's was in the inner city, and she remember when she go to Myers, but she went to the Myers about her nursing job. But that was some years late. That was some years later when she was in her 60s. I used to go to the store, when she in the late '90s and things. So I'm like, okay, she was a walking encyclopedia of Detroit history and stuff too. So
Mm-hmm.
it was really expansive of how her memory was. And then it's like once she got older, her memory started slipping and stuff. And she started not remembering things too well. And then she also used to go to Troy Boca Library, the main branch, and she used to read up on like a lot of different Black Bob history and things too. So, what have you.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's good that you're
Oh,
keeping those stories alive that she shared with you.
thank you, dear.
Can you talk more about, did she share more details with you about how she learned that she would have to move out of Black Bottom?
Well, she had heard about it on the radio that they was gonna let the city was gonna come in and tear down. They were gonna put a new freeway in, a 375, and that she and all the other people that live in the Black Bomb Paradise neighborhood were all being evicted via eminent domain. So since the city was really racist back then, the city government decided to put all these people out of the area and tear on all the buildings and houses and stuff too to put this freeway in. And she learned about what she learned through word of mouth and through the local newspaper, Detroit News, and it really kind of broke her heart and soul because she had lived there about 13 or so years in Black Bottom before the government and the state took over, and they had all them different rules and stuff. One rule for the white folk, one for the black folk, about how they was all forced to move elsewhere. Out of Black Bottom, so they put the freeways and stuff in, like the I-10 freeway in them, and some of the people eventually end up in the projects, like Herman Gardens. Let me see, Jeffries West, Jeffries East. And they really tore the neighborhood up so badly and stuff too. There's not even nothing really there. Remember the Black Bottom bonds, except the pictures people have and things like that too of older generations.
Mm-hmm. And how was, so you said when she moved, when she got evicted, she
Yeah.
moved to where? Say that one more time.
She moved to Lincoln Street for a while. She raised my dad in a fourth family. Then she lived on then she lived on Grove and Highland Park later because she was in the Detroit West Side for a while. But she did mention Lincoln Street. She mentioned Grove Street and Highland Park. Then she remembered then she lived on two houses on Grove Street. Then where she raised me at later was on Fair Street on the other side of Highland Park in the 6 Mile Oakland area. And she had lived there about 25 years. I lived with her 5 years, but she stayed in that whole area from 87 to 2012. I was there with her from 1995 to 2000. 2000, I moved out of her home to go to college, and then I talked with her again. I kind of lost touch with her for a while, and then she still kept telling me about the little narratives about the Black Bomb and things. And then she didn't really mention too much more about that. But she got the dementia diagnosis. So a lot of history got lost and stuff, with the memory and things too. And then I studied some Black Bomb history myself in the main library of the Detroit Public Library itself, the main branch on Woodward Avenue. So I
Mm.
kind of knew a little bit about Black Bottom and Paradise Valley and all that too, about the different stores they had, the nightclub. She used to tell me that people were like BB King and Bella Reese all them really had came to, yeah, they was more, no, baby, I don't know if BB King was from here, but they said Bella Reese was from here. They had the Motown sound, they had different recording studio. My grandma said she actually knew one of the ladies she worked for as a housekeeper. Her son was in the Funk Brothers band at one point in the '60s. Her son, the lady's son, played in one of the bands for the Motown sound back in the '60s and things. So she kind of remembered that a little bit on stuff. She remember my dad members like the bread companies and what was here, what was there, and stuff before the riots happened and things too. And my grandma stayed in Highland Park a long time after she moved from the Detroit area from the rioting and stuff too. They did on the west side off of Claremont and 12th Street, and whatnot. And all that really happened and stuff too.
Hmm. And how did she share with you about how she was impacted by the destruction? So when she got evicted, like how did that change her life? Did she share any
It
details about
changed
that?
her life in a very bad way because she was really affected by it because that was home for her for a long time, Paradise Valley and the Black Bomb. It changed her so badly that it made her kind of mentally damaged because she was so heartbroken over that, and she kind of got off into she got kind of disturbed by it and stuff, and she started having some mental health issues and things, because one of her younger sisters came to the traveling right not too long after riots happened, and she it changed my grandmother. My grandma was starting to lose her mental health ability and things too, and I kind of noticed that too about her later once I was a kid and things too about how she has mental health issues and things that she never got diagnosed or got treated for and things. So she kind of kept it all secret, because how our culture is, they keep a lot of things secret, and whatnot. And she never got no help or nothing or treatment or anything for the mental health problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then it's like she would tell my dad, about how it was, and how people were obedient to each other and how people were nice to each other. But my dad, he grew up where he didn't really care about her. He was a high schooler. He went to Northern High, then he graduated from the same school I went to, Highland Park School District, and he got into the drug culture real bad. And he's still on drugs to this day. I've not talked with him in a while. He got into drug culture, and I mean, he used to steal from my grandmother, and I mean, she would even have all these pieces her damn job at the Jewish family house had, and like paperwork they would get from around the world. He would steal those and steal her money and her bank cards, and he would go do drugs or he would hustle money, and he couldn't give a job. He couldn't give a job. He couldn't give his own place to live. He was always underneath my grandma. My grandma let him walk all over her and stuff. He walked over me too and stuff, living with her and him, and that was a really bad experience overall. And I mean, eventually I left Highland Park and then I went to college for a while. And then I came back to the city. My son was born and she became a great grandmother to my son. And my father was a grandfather to my son, And it's like, it really overall made her very dysfunctional because it
Mm-hmm.
broke her heart, it broke her soul, everything. And it probably happened to many other people who were in the Black Bottom section of Detroit many years ago.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that.
Well,
And from your perspective, how do you think Black Detroiters overall are impacted by the destruction?
it impacted us in so many ways financially, physically, house wise, job wise, all sort of ways. And then it's like after all that was destroyed, we really had nothing after that. We just got off, a lot of people got in that drug culture, a lot of people got, became homeless long term and were able to keep jobs and they moved everything out to the suburbs and we was just basically left with nothing. And if we did have some neighborhoods that thrived, it was because people were moving out so quickly, and the house became abandoned, and abandoned buildings, and buildings got knocked up to the ground, and stores got destroyed. People left the city, and it was just downhill from there.
Mm-hmm.
And they still see starting to come back, but that's only in certain areas like downtown. But people moving back in. But what about the Black community as a whole? It's like we didn't get nothing, we didn't get anything hard, and you can't put no price on it anyway, in any shape, way, or form, in my honest opinion.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think we're, continuing to be impacted today?
Oh, it still happens there. We still have like that same learn helplessness mentality about, oh, we if we, Some people don't want to get a job. Some people don't want to go to school. And Black folks fought for us to get job opportunities and education opportunities and training skills. Like a lot of us, don't want to, a lot of us don't want anything out of life because we've been so conditioned into not having anything and not fighting for anything. But me, I had to really fight. When I was growing up, I lived in a really bad neighborhood with my grandmother and dad, and I wanted to get out of that area, Detroit, period, and go somewhere else outside Detroit, Wayne County, Michigan, and make myself a better life. And I fought so hard to go to school, that better lifestyle, and I'm kind of, I got some health issues myself too, but I fought so hard to get an education. I fought hard to get better job opportunities and try to get a good housing. I never been able to find no good housing in Detroit. And I mean, I'm also a disabled person too, so it really affected me in all sorts of ways. But I imagine how they felt. They felt like everything was taken away from them, it was never returned, and never got anything out of it. Not even money wise, no housing, no jobs, no livelihood, no real livelihood. It's real terrible. And it's still happening. A lot of that same type of learned helplessness and learned psychological distress still happens today in the community. It still affects me though and stuff, to this day.
Hmm.
I really feel bad for I really feel bad for my grandma.
Yeah,
And
I
she
mean,
fought
that's
so
a
hard to
big
keep going.
trauma.
You knocked there, tore the whole place down 70 years ago.
Hmm. Say that part one more time.
About what there?
You said they tore that whole part down. I missed it.
Yeah.
I was. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel bad for those people that, live had been the first people to live, black folks live in Detroit, and then once, everything just started going down here after they tore the whole place down, they just learned the helplessness, and it's like kind of like they call us to fight, to try to fight for better opportunities, better housing, and it's like, nobody really invested back in us, really, and stuff. There was no reinvestment. There was no banking opportunities. There was no new housing, nothing. And a lot of neighborhoods Detroit is still the same way as they've been the last 50 or so years. Still raggedy, still abandoned, grass not cut, vacant boarded up buildings, vacant burnt out structures, cars that have just been worked, that never been worked on, neighborhoods that never got clean, never got better, or buildings tore down, or buildings that are like explosions, and liquor stores on every corner that sell unhealthy food, and people drinking wine all day, and just hanging on the streets doing nothing but begging and borrowing and stealing and selling things illegally. I used to ride the bus too. Um, and I used to ride the bus everywhere. And I live in a city, and it's like you just see the desolence and despair all the time. That really depressed me so much. Just the despair and seeing old buildings, storefronts and things. You still see the same thing almost in every neighborhood that where it never got revitalized.
Hmm.
And the lot so big, they bigger than football fields, widest football fields, and they never had no new housing, no new businesses, no nothing in a lot of areas, and people out there still homeless and got no jobs, no education opportunities, no training in state. Keep asking, oh, we had training here, we had jobs, but they all that out of the city and put all out here in the suburbs, for everybody else to have, but we got excluded from a lot of things. And that's not really fair. Because I've been researching this too on ongoing. So my grandma used to tell me about, measuring all those narratives, blah. I've been researching my own stuff too as well. I read and I read stuff like that too. But I did my own research, and it's like we never got anything out of the deal. Once all that once all that was taken away from us.
Hmm. I agree. Um, so one thing that I wanted to ask you is that as as part of the redevelopment of 375 that's planned to happen, there should be 20 to 30 acres of land that could be open for development in some way. What would you
Okay.
like to see happen to those 20 to 30 acres as a form of repair or reparations for Black Detroiters?
Well, I mean, what I think they should do is take that same land invest back into transitional housing. They should do transitional housing. They should do housing for like look, they're housing for like orphan and foster kids. They should do housing for mentally ill people. You know, they should do housing for homeless, and they should have like maybe one or two grocery stores in the area, and then some training schools, you know, and have the kids going to maybe two or three schools, you know, and then try to transition back into the working world, or try to help them write a resume and get a job and go to training, you know. They should have more services, like more mental health services. They need to have regular doctor's offices. I mean, they really need a lot of resources in that area, you know, just that alone.
Hmm. So the
They really
main
need
thing,
that.
say that one more time.
I said the people really need that there in that area of 375. Instead of
Mm.
putting all sports bars and sports venues there, and then putting in the casinos and things, you know, they want, oh, we want entertainment, we want this, we want that. And it's like, you know, ain't nobody, you know, person that's been here long term in Detroit, like around 50, 60 years, been here 50, 60 years, they don't get nothing but the younger people and the people moving back into downtown, the Caucasian folk, they get everything, but we don't get nothing.
Hmm.
It's like we still the same run, the same. It's like a lot of people I've seen when I used to go downtown to Trenton, you know, before I moved out the city and everything, you know, I used to see the same type of people down there. Don't have no housing, don't have no career, don't have no schooling, don't have no training, just out doing nothing with their lives, wasting their lives away, drinking and drugging, and you know, just bothering people and not getting the help they truly deserve. You know, I used to see all that. They used to really depress me every single day, and begging for change, and not being able to have access to a clean shower, not having access to a bed or nothing, you know. It's just been heartbreaking for me after all these years. And I didn't experience homelessness and not having a steady home to be in and whatnot, and being, you know, but I had to bump change and stuff before too, or you know, and just I really have struggled too, you know, and whatnot myself, you know, and it's just sad, you know, and it's like, you know, it's like every time you get on the bus in the city, it's all the same type of people on there. People that don't know where they're going, they ain't got no direction in their life. The young folks don't care about, you know, trying to better themselves, that our ancestors died, they fight for the opportunity our ancestors died and fought hard for. We don't fight for nothing anymore. All we care about is getting a little welfare check, a little food stamps, a little, you know, these are electronics, you know, and we don't really care about anything anymore, nothing positive anymore. It's just all this negative and stuff, you know, and it's really sad and disturbing, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What do you think is most important for future generations to remember about Black Bottom and Paradise
So
Valley?
Black Bomber's original place, you know, that we started, that Black folks started from when we first came to Detroit back in the 40s. And that, you know, we had our own businesses, we had our own housing systems, our own clinics, our own everything until that was destroyed, you know, until somebody just came along and just happened to destroy all that because they hated us so much. And we are still hated today. Instead of all these issues to deal with, and you know, they allowed liquor stores. Yes, they allowed liquor stores come set up with Arabic people. You know, sell liquor stores and sell stores that are hardly there, or they got old food and old butter on the shelf. And these gas stations where people still getting killed from, and people killing each other and stuff. And you know, it's just been self destruction all this time, you know, and it's like it really needs to stop, you know, but it's like, you know, nobody cares, nobody's sort of accountable for anything, and it's terrible. I don't know how I sleep at night thinking about all these things. It's hard
Hmm.
to sleep, you know, about these things at nighttime and stuff too. Even when I get a nap during the day, you know, sometimes I still think about all these things that's been, you know, embedded in me through my grandmother and you know, and other people that live in Black Bottom, and I'm in Detroit myself, you know, and I still think about these things, you know.
Hmm.
Even the bus system would be better there, you know, and it's been times where I've had to wait over an hour for a bus in the inner city, or they don't have transportation available, or you know, they talk about, oh, we're gonna invest money in this, and it's like it never happens, you know. It's like the politicians, I'm not going to miss the our politicians, I don't see it, so they take all that money that's supposed to go to wars to people and they pocket themselves. And it's like, you know, you don't get nothing done or nothing accomplished or nothing achieved, you know.
Hmm. And why is it important for us to remember Black Bottom and Paradise Valley?
because that's part of our culture. That's part of our history. I mean, we don't want everything to be whitewashed or, or just not known or be hidden history that nobody wants to, that nobody other group want us to know. We know about everybody else's culture and group, but not ours. Ours has been whitewashed and erased and stuff, in history books and whatnot, And it's really sad how that all of that was erased. It was terrible. And even when I was a child, I was out on a briefly with my late mom, and she would buy a little Black history booklets for me to read from the little grocery store chain down there when I was a kid. She was actually teaching me Black history before they started really teaching it here in the schools later. Because my mom, she didn't have much, and she didn't have no high school diploma, but at least she taught me about being proud of our history, our Black history, and stuff. What people fought for to get what we need today, and it's like we just not doing what we're supposed to do to honor them and stuff. And people forget about all that now. They don't care enough and stuff. It's really disturbing and it's frightening that nobody cares anymore. Nobody's held accountable, and these kids today is dying off, young folks are dying off, and nobody cares about being healthy. Nobody teaches how to be healthy. Nobody teaches about good mental health. Nobody teaches about physical health. Nobody teaches about finances. How to buy land or buy a property or buy a house or even try to buy an apartment to help people that's homeless and stuff get moved to a building, get services and things. Nobody teaches that anymore. Nobody cares. Nobody does anything. Everybody's so selfish now for themselves. And it really is very frightening.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I appreciate you doing, having this conversation and, playing your part in making sure that we're able to remember our history, because
Yes,
this is one way that we're able to do it is having these types of conversations.
mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you'd like to get on the record about your grandma or Black Bottom or anything else that we've talked about?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Well, that was pretty